starting our Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and it's Wednesday, March 1st, 2023 at 6 o'clock on the dot. Call to order. If I could ask Carrie to do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Carrie Schmelter.
Here.
Commissioner Mary Vox Bell.
Here.
Chairman Bruce Trimber.
Here.
Commissioner Josh Simpson. Vice Chairman Evan Goodwin.
Here.
Commissioner Carletha Frazier.
Here.
Commissioner Will Gunther.
In attendance.
He's in attendance, by the way, via Zoom. Or how are we, is it a Zoom or how are we doing this?
Microsoft Teams.
Microsoft Teams. So hello, Will. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the meeting. Notice regarding adjournment. The Historic Preservation Commission will not hear new items after 9:30 p.m. unless authorized by the majority vote of the commission members present. Items which have not been heard before 9:30 may be continued to the next regular meeting or a special meeting date as determined by the commission members. Notice regarding public comments. Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman and in speaking avoid disrespect to commission, staff, or other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and we have a timer, correct, if we do the comment? Yes, thank you. So just asking, do we have public comments?
We have 0.
I thought we had, someone said that, did you sign in?
I have Elizabeth here, sorry.
So I understand we have someone that has a public comment that's going to be public commenting. Yes. And when we do the public comments, are we doing them in this order before we adopt the agenda?
No,
We can adopt the agenda in the minutes while this one fills out his paperwork.
Okay, very good. So adoption of the agenda as written. Do I get a motion, please?
I'll motion to adopt it.
Thank
As
you.
written.
I'm looking for second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Will. That's wonderful. Adoption of minutes as written by Carrie, and thank you, Carrie, for always doing a successful and nice job on that, for the February 1st, 2023.
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Looks like the minutes are adopted. All right, public comments for items not on the agenda. Is that what we're looking at, sir?
Yes.
Okay. If you could step to the podium, speak to the microphone, and give us your name and address, and
Okay.
you're limited to 3 minutes.
Okay. Pierce Scott. I live at 4 Chiswick Way with Pierce Scott Architects in downtown. I was here to request a clarification change to some language in the UDO. We are working with a potential client downtown looking at doing an inn, and in reading the definitions of a bed and breakfast versus an inn, bed and breakfast the owner has to live on site and it's 4 to 6 rooms. An inn is effectively the same definition, but 6 to 11 rooms, which is, I think, not even possible within the UDO due to the square footage requirements. So what we've come up with and we think is more appropriate for an inn is to not have the owner have to live on site, but to allow for a management company to operate the inn. That's really all
So that would be something that Charlotte would be looking at, I think. Is that correct?
Correct, and we have looked at it, and I can talk, I don't know if I need to talk to you about it or discuss it here. If you'd like, we can talk about it during this section regarding the UDO amendments.
Okay. But that would have to be something that would be approved by the town board, correct?
Correct.
If we change the UDO. So that's just this body, so that would also have to be presented to the town board for their approval.
Right.
Because we as a body don't approve the UDO.
Right. I'm looking for your recommendation to them to
Okay.
make that change.
So let me get this, is you're looking at building a an inn, let's call it a hotel, something with, I'm just trying to get an understanding of.
The concept was a collection of little buildings. In Charleston, there's an inn that's, I think, 6 little buildings, but it's all run by the same group. And so instead of VRBO or a bed and breakfast, it's not a true hotel with like full staff, but there's a management company that operates. And so if you had 2 or 3 little buildings together, because you really can't have an 11-room building in downtown, in Old Town. There'd be very small rooms if you could manage it.
So at this point, we have a bed and breakfast available, but they have to live there, where we don't have an inn concept.
We have an inn concept, but they have to live there as well.
With the inn concept, they have to live there as well. Okay,
It's
so
hard.
what you're trying to do is exclude the fact that you don't want them to be living on site.
Right. Because then one person can't operate 3 little collection of 3 little buildings, for instance.
Charlotte, is that clear? Is that,
Yes, I understand.
okay, great. All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we're looking for old business. Is there any old business? Taking none. So now we're into the new business, and it looks like Katie, you're up.
I am.
Oh, just as a comment too is, I know that we request for members of recusal. I believe that there is one recusal request, and I don't believe there's any other situations with recusal needed. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioners, I don't have an applicant here for this item real quick, and so I am working on getting a call to them. I'm pulling up their phone number real quick. If I could ask you just to outside, maybe call Steve in just a second. If it would be okay with you all to adjust the agenda. I didn't realize they hadn't walked in the last second there. To hear item number 2 before we hear item number 1 of new business.
Would, I guess, do we need to change our agenda, or do we just need to ask the applicant that's here if they want to step forward on the, let's just say that we're going to take a quick vote. Let's change
If you don't mind.
let's change the agenda. Can I get a motion to change the agenda from adding 1 to 2 and 2 to 1?
I'll make a motion to change the agenda to address item 2 before item 1.
Very good. Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
That's approved, so therefore, in the applicant, I take it, Pierce Scott, you're here to represent that, and you're fine with that agenda change?
It's great.
And I'm going to recuse myself.
All right. Looks like, so we have the 37 Stock Farm Road.
Thank you. Okay, so the first item that we have tonight is our second item, which is 37 Stock Farm Road. And the applicant, I'm going to read it because that way it gains a little bit of time for her to make this phone call, but the applicant, Pierce Scott Architects, on behalf of the owners, John and Lisa Sulco, requests that the Historic Preservation Commission approve the following application. It is a certificate of appropriateness to allow the addition of 64 square foot roof over an existing porch on an existing residential structure, which is located at 37 Stock Farm Road in the Old Town Bluffton Historic District, which is zoned Neighborhood Conservation HD. Briefly, Will, can you see the screen that has the request on it, just to make sure that I didn't, when I made this full screen, mess up?
We're good. I can see it.
Thank you. This is the location of that property, so you can see May River Road along the top of your screen. And this is Stock Farm Road. It is here on your left as you're driving in before you get to the area where it changes to a gravel path. It is in the neighborhood conservation, not the riverfront edge zoning district. So the front of this lot is Stock Farm Road. The rear of the lot is the cove behind the property. These are the existing conditions of the area in which we are discussing. So this is the area where the roof will be proposed over. At the back of the house, this is the full back of the house. So the proposed addition will be right here on the structure. The way that our ordinance is written, and this is for better or worse, sometimes it's something minor like this, other times it's addition of a greater amount of square footage, is that if square footage is being added under a roof, it has to be a certificate of appropriateness. It cannot be reviewed as a site feature. The reason for this is so that you don't get hodgepodges added on over time. And so this way it captures all of those things. Sometimes it's a small project that has 64 square feet. Sometimes it is the addition of a carport or something like that to it. Sometimes it's covering a porch that was open, which would change the massing of that building. So, for example, if the front porch of I can't come up with, or the side porch on Fat Patty's decided to put a full roof over the front of that, it would obviously have an effect on what the architectural structure, the appearance of that structure. And so this is a way to capture all of those things, which is why this project is coming before you tonight. So this is the location, this is the site plan. I've rotated it on its side from what you have in your packet so that north is up, which makes Stock Farm Road here. May River Road would still be at the top of your screen, off the screen obviously. And the tidal cove of the May River is on your right here. So this is the area here. I've plotted it in red, but it is this stoop or porch that is off the rear of the structure. And then in the site plan, this is the location. So again, I've rotated it so that Stock Farm Road would be on the left of your screen. The cove would be on your right of the screen. And then this are the elevations as currently existing. So there is this small porch here, and what they're proposing is to put a roof over here. This is primarily to prevent water damage from going in the house because of the weird way that, or not the weird way, but the way that this house crickets here, they're getting some water inside and are trying to prevent that over the door and the window area. And then this is the left side elevation, which has the stoop here. It is set back from this, so you can see here, this is that garage door wall is right here. So from the left side, this will not stick out past it. It'll be set back behind this plane of it. So you will not see it at all from the front or from the right side of the house. You may see, I guess, a little bit of the gabled end from the other side of the house, but not much. And then this is a wall section, or a porch section, I guess, because it's not an enclosed space. It's just the roof overhanging it. As you have heard before, the HPC reviews the 8 criteria which are set forth in Section 318.3 of our Unified Development Ordinance when they're considering an application for a certificate of appropriateness. They have the authority to approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. Amanda is here on behalf of the project to speak to the application. Staff has found that it does meet the requirements of 318.3 and recommends approval as submitted. I am happy to answer any questions you have. Amanda is here to speak on the project.
So we didn't find any issues as to items.
I'm sorry.
Good. And it looks like we're, as you said, approval by this. Does anyone have a discussion on this? Anyone have a concern? No? Do we still have a quorum?
Pretty straightforward.
Ah, there you are. Well, I forgot about you, Will. You know,
I didn't mean to scare you.
I don't see your little face in the corner or something like that. So.
It's okay.
But hi, thank you, Will. So with that, Amanda, do you want to address anything, or do you want to talk about anything, or are we good? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion,
I'll
please.
make a motion to approve the application as submitted by the applicant.
Second.
Got a second? I'm looking for any discussion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
And aye, we have a unanimous, so therefore it passes. So thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Amanda, for doing your homework and knowing what has to be done.
Okay, I'm going to swap out with Charlotte, and she can take over the discussion items.
So is the applicant on the first one actually showing up, or what's going on?
I got a hold of the owner, and he's trying to get in touch with the agent. I'm not certain just yet.
We will start on the discussion item if that's okay with you guys, and we can always go backwards on this. I'll double check. I'll reach out to him
But
again.
we need to have another vote just to be legal eagle and say we're changing the agenda. Since we voted on the agenda, let's do that just to make sure we're just being legal eagle. So I'm looking for a motion to put Charlotte's discussion forward now and possibility of one not happening. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
That's approved. Thanks, Will. All right, Charlotte.
Yeah.
So,
Ready.
again, this is, let me ask the procedure on this. This is presented to us, and then if there's anything after review or after looking at this in bed, you know, tomorrow night or something like that, and I see something else that needs to be changed, we just bring it forward to you?
Sure. Yes, this is an informal discussion. Right now, the Historic Preservation Commission actually doesn't have any voting authority regarding text amendments, but we wanted to bring this before you before it goes on to the Planning Commission, which we anticipate to happen later in the month. Or possibly in April. We're still trying to work through that. So these are amendments that have been around. Some of them we've talked about for a while now. They've been lingering. And then there are some other amendments that we've identified that we've needed, that we need going forward. So what I want to do tonight is just highlight them. I've got 16 pages of amendments, which seems very substantial. It doesn't look as bad as it is. And you do have them. They have been provided to you. So if you want to scroll through that while I'm talking, feel free to do that. If you want to interrupt me or ask questions during the presentation, that's fine too. Let me just give you a highlight of what the intent of this is. So there are different sections of the UDO that we're looking to amend, including the section 325 designation of a contributing resource. And the purpose of the change to that particular section is to add a process to remove the status of contributing from a contributing resource. We don't currently have that. We've had an informal process in the past, but we wanted to formalize that. And that's simply using the criteria that we use to designate a resource and to determine whether or not those criteria still apply. And I can bring that amendment or that text up in a moment. Kind of the main one that's changing is the certificate of appropriateness review. We wanted to add a process for relocating structures, whether they're contributing or not. We've had some issues with that in the past. We don't really have criteria for that. So we've added that or are proposing that. We're trying to improve the requirements for demolition of structures, whether or not they're contributing. And we've done some reformatting to that section. I think that will be easier and understandable as you read through it. There are a number of smaller amendments related to the Old Town Bluffton Historic District, Section 515. It includes some reformatting, some typos, and we've also are proposing adjustments to the Build 2 zones for a couple of districts. We think right now that they're too minimal, and there's some difficulty putting in the required landscaping, and perhaps these Build 2 zones are not indicative of the development pattern of Old Town. We've had some issues in the past relating to accessory structures. There's a gap in the size requirement for sheds and for carriage houses, so we want to close that gap. In addition, we are proposing some definition changes and some additions, so I'll go through those fairly quickly. So my PowerPoint are highlighting the things that we believe are probably the more important items, and then I can go through the text if you'd like me to do that. I don't mean to highlight everything. I'm not going to read anything to you. So again, it's very informal, and we may find there are some things that you'd like to change, add, or maybe we've missed that we need to include. So for the COFA review process, one of the things that we want to get clarity on is how we use terms, and we would like to use the terms new construction, alteration, relocation, and demolition.
Just for clarification for others, what does COFA stand for?
That's the certificate of appropriateness, and that's what you would need to do any type of new construction or alteration within Old Town Historic District. So this is the review process and the criteria that would apply to the review. So for new construction, which we see mostly within Old Town, and for alterations, there are 5 criteria. The first one is new. This would require that there has to be an approved final development plan. We don't require that for single-family development, but say if it's a commercial development, we'd like for that plan to be approved before we look at the COFA, because sometimes there's a bit of back and forth when that plan changes and it hasn't been finalized, and then we get the COFA, and then the plan changes and we have to go back and adjust the COFA again. So it kind of volleys back and forth, and it creates, a huge time for staff to be able to do that, and also creates an expense as well, even for the applicant. So that criteria is new. The conformance with the provisions of Article 5, that stays the same. The requirement that for consistency with the Old Town Master Plan remains, and we've also included the comprehensive plan, Blueprint Bluffton, which was adopted last year. So we want to make certain that these changes in Old Town are consistent with the long-range plan. The criterion for is something we kind of have right now. It relates to item D in 515. And this is showing that there's a compatible visual relationship. So anytime there's new construction or alterations, we want to make certain that it fits in with the character of Old Town. Not that someone can, you can't max out necessarily, even though the building type or the standards, the requirements of the zoning district may allow for that. We want to give the board the ability to say perhaps the scale is inappropriate or the mass is inappropriate for a particular location, or maybe the setbacks are not consistent for a particular street. So this criterion, I think, is something that we've needed, and we've beefed that up, so to speak, and complying with the applications manual. So that's not a change. If the structure is a contributing structure, in addition to the 5 criteria I mentioned, there are 2 additional. The 5th one right now, we already have the requirement that it comply with the Secretary of Interior's standards. And then 6, we kind of have this now too, and we are also beefing this up. We want to make certain that if there's any additions or any alterations to the structure, that it's very clear that the new work can be differentiated from what's there. That if for some reason, for example, someone wanted to add on a porch, that the new addition could be done in a way that it could be easily removed without damaging the contributing structure.
I have a question. Looking at this as additional, let's see, contributing structure additionally shall not destroy cultural. New work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with. Isn't that somewhat, if you go back to new work shall be differentiated from the old? If we go back to the other, I thought you said that it has to be similar.
That's new construction and alterations. So in addition to the 5 criteria, 5 and 6 apply to contributing structures only. So if you have a contributing structure and you want to do an addition, for example, the 6 criteria would be applied in the review. If it's only new construction or alterations, criteria 1 through 5 would then apply. Not all, and I'm sorry, and Glenn, feel free to jump in if you think.
I mean, for the contributing structure, any addition has to be differentiated from the historic form of the building. When you're building new, that wouldn't apply because it's all new construction.
Why? Why are we wanting to have differentiated?
So that we can maintain so you'd be able to still tell that that's the historic structure. It just has the historic structure is still there. You just have an addition to it.
So how would somebody differentiate?
So for example, the old post office building across the street, they're doing a new addition on the side, which is the porch. And then they're also doing the addition out the back. The back is smaller, different material, different shape. The exterior wall of the historic structure will stay there. So that if future owner wanted to take that piece down, the historic integrity of the original structure is still there.
But it still would, like the goal would still be to make it
Look old or look.
uniform looking?
Yeah,
Okay. That's not the right word, but
yeah, that's the right idea,
when you
yes.
say differentiate, I think of like something brand new looking stuck on an old building.
Right, so
But I know that's not your
differentiate
intent.
is basically a visual term to, oh, I can see where the addition was.
Okay.
It still seems like it's a little wonky there because one's saying one, one's saying the other, so that's just my, it's just my.
It is a little confusing because when you say differentiate, you think it's gotta be different and not similar. And when you want it to be similar to complement the existing structure.
You're not gonna put a pyramid in the loop. That's completely bizarre, but
Not in this case, right?
I'm just being bizarre, but I'm just, yeah, I'm just,
But isn't the loop a pyramid?
Yes, the Louvre does have a pyramid.
no,
Oh!
I'm just.
Thought you meant the museum, I'm sorry.
Okay, so that term differentiate, that word is a little bit confusing and we can work on
I
that.
think it meant, yeah.
Okay,
All right,
okay, I understand. So let's see, let me go on to relocation of structures. Again, this is something that we are missing right now in our current COFA review process. So we wanted to have some criteria there if someone is moving a non-contributing structure, which most of our buildings are within Old Town, we will treat that as new construction. So if someone's moving a building into the district or within the district that's not contributing, it'll be treated like new construction in the location where it's moving. If it's contributing, then there are specific criteria that would apply. We don't like to see contributing structures move, unfortunately, but sometimes it may be necessary. And we believe that that the applicant may need to prove an extraordinary circumstance. And we're still trying to work through that because there may be some situations, we don't want to be too onerous because there are certain circumstances that may require it to be moved. So we're still working through that. I've talked to our legal staff about that, and we are going to
we
be.
have the exact wording.
Right, so we'll be refining that. There are shades of gray here, and it's a little bit challenged to write an
We're gonna get
ordinance.
the final before it's submitted to the town or.
Before it goes to planning commission?
No, I guess it has to be approved by the town board.
Correct.
Or the planning commission is going to do the same thing that we're doing.
They are required to make a recommendation. They're advisory.
But they're not gonna vote on the change of the UDO, that has to be done by the board.
They will actually vote on they'll make a recommendation.
Just like we, but my
Correct.
question is are we going to see, prior to it being submitted to the board, the town board, the commission?
Yes, we
Are
can
we
send
going
it to you.
be able to see the complete copy, and will you supply all of us with that so we have an exciting evening of reading through this?
Sure, we can do that.
I would just appreciate it to have the input from all.
And we can do
When we have
that
it all.
before it goes to planning commission. If you still have questions about something, then we can discuss it then when it's being presented and, make any adjustments that we may need to. So again, the relocation, if it is approved by the Preservation Commission, we will require that wherever the receiving site is, that it have its final development plan approved so that we have some knowledge of what it will look like at that location, whether or not it's appropriate. And then once that is completed, then the structure can move. We are also, in addition to this, developing some guidelines that will go along, for example, regarding documentation of the building and of this site, working with the historic preservationists regarding the move, and anything else that we feel is necessary to document and make certain that building moves safely and intact as possible. There will be a structural engineering report required, and from that, we'll be able to identify whether or not there's integrity issues, structural problems, whether or not it can be moved intact or partially intact. Ideally, we want to see the whole thing move as one if possible. And if it can't, then we want to have some input on how it's moved and pieces, how it's moved. Demolition, again, we always believe that demolition should be the absolute last resort. For non-contributing structures, just basic information. We want to document the building, no matter how old it is, and make certain that it complies with the applications manual. For a contributing structure, again, there's a little bit higher threshold for review. There the criteria that I've identified in the text that you have, again, structural engineering report. And there's a possibility to delay the decision for 180 days because we want to try to work out another arrangement if possible, reaching out to our historic.
Why do we pick 180 days? That seems a little extreme.
It's in our current ordinance right now, and the Preservation Commission may not need 180 days, but that will give us some time to reach out and find maybe it's possible to relocate the building instead. Maybe someone wants to purchase that building. Maybe it can move elsewhere on the property. Looking at different scenarios to see if it's possible before it is demolished. If it is approved, we'd like to see a final development plan for the property approved first. Again, this is another kind of a legal thing we're working through to see whether or not it's feasible. And then again, the guidelines will have those to document the building before it's demolished, if that's the case.
When you go back and you say documentation of a resource site required, in other words, you're looking for different guidelines, for example, having townspeople present when demolition or whatever is taking place so that you have the ability to not say we didn't say that, in other words, it's all done.
Right, for example, if the
That makes
commission,
everyone happy, including the town, including the applicant, so that they're doing it, not making it so restrictive, but making it so that, people can do things.
right, so if there was a condition, for example, that you asked for certain historic components to be removed for reuse perhaps, or for resale, we want to make certain that those components are actually taken off and that they're not demolished. So, we need to have someone there on the site at the time.
And will we have something in there that says that we have some guidelines for the townsfolk? In other words, that could be there. I'm just concerned
Correct.
that, but we'll be there in 6 months. In other words, it's going to be done on a time-to-time basis.
Correct, yeah. We'll develop a plan with the property owner or the applicant. And I gave an example of Chapel Hill, and that's in the package there, kind of what they do. And we've seen it elsewhere. Glenn provided me with an example from Brunswick, Georgia.
So we have some good.
Yes, so it's very typical. Other communities do have guidelines.
Copy.
So yes, there are some good examples out there that we can certainly borrow from. Okay, so that's the process part of it. Now let me switch over to what I mentioned before, that we have this gap between carriage house building types and garden structures. So right now, our carriage house building type is anything 200 square feet minimum. And our garden structures are less than 120 square feet. So for buildings that are greater than 120 square feet and less than 200, there is this gap. So we want to be able to close that. What we'd like to do is change the carriage house building type minimum square footage to 121 square feet. And 121 is where a building permit would be required. And then for a garden structure, we would actually like to change our small accessory building to be a shed and not call them garden structures. Garden structures, that's not an intuitive term. They're what we would like to call walls, gazebos, pergolas, patios, anything that's not enclosed, we believe should be called a garden structure. So the larger accessory building is a carriage house building type. It doesn't necessarily have to have a dwelling unit, but because we have a building type requirement, it's a carriage house. And then, sorry?
Another word other than shed. I don't know, shed reminds me of the steel thing that you buy from Sears.
Well, shed is in our current UDO, and that's why we've used it.
There's something, I'm just being, just personifies something like, that's just.
And we do
that's
have,
just a throw.
we do have a new term for that, which I can go through in just a moment. But But to give you an idea regarding size, I found this graphic on the internet that I think might be helpful. So the shed, which would require a site feature permit, is anything less than 120 square feet. So it's the kind of the two small buildings that you see on the left, and for the carriage house, 121 square feet or greater would be the larger buildings that you see there, just to give you a sense of size that I'm talking about.
Katie, I know we've had issues in regards to this whole shed carriage garden in the past, so is this gonna help satisfy that, so we don't get into that,
This will absolutely satisfy
the big brouhaha that we've had?
Yes,
Perfect, okay, thank you.
that's the whole goal.
I know, that's why I just wanted to,
Can you go back to the definitions?
I can bring them up in just a moment. I think that will help. And this is an example. This is not Bluffton, but just to give you an idea, shed on the right doesn't need a building permit. The carriage house on the left would.
shed that doesn't need a building permit.
So anything
That's
less,
opening up the door.
but that's the building code.
Building permit. It still requires a site feature or a certificate of appropriateness depending on what they're doing, but it does not require a building permit because any structure under 120 square feet that's residential in nature does not require one.
So we're not gonna see some guy dropping off his shed that he just bought at Larry's shed down the street.
No more than usual. We see it, we stop it, we do our best on that one, but no.
We would still have to approve it.
Still requires planning
It still
review.
requires review.
If it's over 120 square
Well,
feet.
yeah, it'll still require-
When it
it'll still
requires a
come-
building permit.
No, I understand it doesn't, if it's a site improvement, it doesn't require that, correct?
It all requires planning review, it doesn't
But,
require building safety review.
Or HPC approved.
It would require staff review if it's under 121, which is the current, sorry.
Do we currently have that in place
We
throughout
do.
the town?
We do.
Really?
Okay. Alrighty. I'm not sure you're all convinced yet, but.
No, I'm not.
And it's okay. I know it can be a little confusing.
Okay.
So as we were looking at the size range for the carriage house, we started noticing a few other things too regarding some of the notes or the characteristics of carriage house that we think we should also change. And so the first one, we had an issue fairly recently regarding attached accessory dwelling unit. And for an accessory structure, we want to make it clear that it has to be incidental and distinct from the principal building if it is attached. So we've added some new language there. We've indicated that right now only one carriage house is permitted per lot, but we wanted to address along the riverfront, the zoning district there, that there is the potential to have two per lot, provided that there's at least 1 acre of land in that lot. So that's something that's come up in the past too that we wanted to correct. Regarding what the carriage house could be used for, we've identified that, just kind of a variation of what we have right now. And then with garage, we wanted to be clear about the number of bays and the size of the bay, the width of the bay, to limit it to 2 bays that are no more than 12 feet wide that will allow for a vehicle or for a boat. And then additionally allow a third bay that's not more than 6 feet wide, which could be a golf cart bay. And to give a little bit of flexibility too regarding the location of the carriage house, we also wanted to give the UDO administrator the ability to make an adjustment to the location that may be appropriate for contributing resources, because it may not be possible to get that into the rear yard. So there's a little flexibility that's written in.
Is it possible for the garage limited to 2 bays not exceeding 12 feet in width to reword it such that it doesn't sound like 12 feet total? Because you can't fit 2 cars and, because it did say, 12 feet each
Yes.
on the past one, so just
Yeah.
to clarify.
That makes sense. Alrighty.
One normal car and one very small car.
That makes sense. Okay, what I'd like to do now, I could switch over to, if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, we can get into the actual text. So again, this is the designation of contributing resources, providing the opportunity for a property owner to request that the contributing status be removed. Not a great deal of change here. Basically, it's using the criteria that we apply to determine whether or not it has contributing aspects for the district, and applying that same criteria to consider whether or not it should be removed. Any questions on that particular one? Okay. Then we have the COFA Historic District permit process. And again, I've given you a clean copy here. I think it would have been really difficult to read if I had all this strike through in red and underlined. So I've given you a clean copy. Some of it we've carried over from the current UDO. So there really isn't much change in 1 and 2. The format's a little bit different. So we have the review criteria for new construction and alterations. It's items 1 through 5 would apply. And if you're familiar enough with the UDO now, it's kind of all mixed in. There's stuff about demolition. It's all mixed in together. It's a little bit confusing. And then we have the criteria for contributing resources. We've got the criteria specifically for relocation, and then we have the criteria for demolition. The delay of decision, we have that right now, 180 days. And then the effect and expiration of approvals and the amendments, that stays the same. There's no change there. Any questions? Okay. The next one are the garden structures. And let me bring up the term that we have for shed. And I'm not going to read that out loud. Again, this is our smaller structure that's less than 120 square feet. And we're also indicating that there should be no more than 3 per lot, because we've had some issues with that too. We don't want it to become excessive.
3 sheds.
3 sheds, and it could be a freezer. It could be, and again, shed is intended to be a comprehensive term. It's just a small building, and it could be a freezer. We've added a definition too for accessory structure, which we don't currently have in our existing UDO. So again, that's a comprehensive umbrella term. And then for garden structure, we've added that. It's kind of a standard right now in the UDO, but it would be better as a definition, a term. So we've indicated that it's an unenclosed structure. Again, fences, walls, pergolas, gazebos. And then some other little adjustments there based on the proposal. And then, as I mentioned, some corrections related to the carriage house. So if you look at the particular zoning districts, there's the identification of the different building types that are permitted, including carriage house. And what we'd like to do in all of our historic districts is cross-reference to the carriage house building type, rather than have all of that information in this location. It's kind of potential to be contradictory, so there will be a cross-reference to the carriage house building type. And this is what you see here. The various zoning districts were making that cross-reference. And what I talked about just a little while ago with the carriage house building type, some of the characteristics we are making changes to. Ready? And then let me move on to an item that I did not talk about earlier. And I believe I referenced is that within certain zoning districts within Old Town, we would like to change the front build-to zone. Again, we believe that the proximity of some of these buildings to the street is too minimal. It doesn't allow for the required landscaping to be there and is not necessarily the development pattern of Bluffton. So within the neighborhood core district, we are proposing smaller setbacks, or excuse me, a little bit larger. They're not substantial, so you see everything is pretty much between 5 and 10 feet for the various building types. So for example, a mansion apartment house was only 5 feet, and we're proposing now that it be 10 feet. And for the additional building type to go from 0 feet, which is not typical of Bluffton, of Old Town, 0 to 10 feet. And then within the neighborhood center district, again, some adjustments there as well. Now, things like the promenade that's already been approved and they've already got their setbacks, part of their approved plan, are not affected by this.
Hey, this looks like it's somewhat of a substantial change. I'm just trying to remember, how many properties did we have that were utilizing the old 5 foot? And now you're doing 10 foot, so you're really either minimizing the square footage or you're minimizing, you're shrinking.
So this is actually going to be beneficial, I believe, for most projects because the minimum width for a front porch on a structure, which is required for all residential and commercial, if it's most building types required to have a colonnade porch or arcade, which is another projection from the front, which is allowed to encroach in that front build-to. They're 6 feet. A minimum porch is 6 feet. A minimum colonnade is 8 feet. So the front wall of the building, because it cannot overhang the property line, is at least 6 feet, usually 8 feet, which gives them less wiggle room on some of these than it will now. So if there's a tree that we need to protect or something like that, allowing for this wider range that's pushed back from the street a little bit will actually give them more opportunity to be able to place their home. Because right now, with the maximum at 15, if you're required 8, you're now down, I can't do math, so I can't even 7.
I'm thinking Tabby Shell area, I don't know how many more lots are in there, but that's gonna push the houses back further in some instances.
It actually won't in Tabby Shell either, because Tabby Shell is under an approved development plan, which has setbacks already in place. Tabby Roads, Stock Farm, the Promenade, the May River Road subdivision, which is that subdivision off Gothi Road, those all have predetermined setbacks, which are part of their development plan, which were implemented prior to the ordinance in place. So they won't change. It's open lots that have just straight zoning.
Okay, thank you.
What about in those development plans for the accessory buildings that we're using?
You'll need to come up.
5 feet still,
That's
because that's carriage house.
Yeah, so the carriage house
You want to
is,
step forward, did you want to make a comment?
Amanda Denmark, Pierce
Who are you?
Amanda Denmark, Pierce Scott Architects.
Okay.
So I was just asking if it's changing to the 10 feet, then in those development areas that are Stock Farm, Tabby Roads, all of that, because they don't have setbacks, I guess, for carriage houses, is it still 5 or 10?
Yes, it would still be 5 because that's not being proposed for change.
Is that your intent?
Yes. All right, let me continue on. And again, there are a couple little typo changes that we need to fix. We are also removing, there's a section in Old Town Historic District in 515 that relates to large building footprints, and I'm not exactly certain why this is in here. If you recall, back in 2021, we made adjustments relating to building size, and this is a standalone section of 515.5 that exists that doesn't seem necessary. And Katie, I don't know if you've never used this, have you?
1223 May River Road, the only one in the historic district at this time.
Okay.
It's an existing building, that's the old
Dollar General.
Dollar General.
Okay. And you know, looking through the various criteria there, it's just, we believe that it's not necessary and that our current ordinance will cover it through the additional building type. There's that. Some typo things. Chimneys, we've made a little correction there. I think this has come up a few times. I won't read that. We're removing the word bulkhead from one of our photographs. This is not a term that we use here in Bluffton. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the UDO. Bulkhead means something different for us. And anything else? Let's see, basement. We are revising the term or the definition for basement. And Katie, if you have anything you want to say about it.
There are a few, but it's not standard, and this just shores up that language so that we make sure that we're not getting 5-story buildings that are claiming to be basements in our historic district.
Great.
Thinking ahead, and we actually had the term raised basement in there, which is odd. I never knew that existed until I did a word search, and so we are taking that one out.
It does.
Making revisions to the current definition for building, providing a definition for historic integrity, which we used back in section 318. Some tweaks to the definition for principal building. We're adding a definition for stucco. And again, we have just another little typo, little correction there. So it's a fairly broad approach to our amendments. It's possible we may identify some others, possible that you may have some that we haven't talked about or that we'll need to adjust. And are there any questions?
We had Will on the phone, and Will's been involved in the beginning of this get-go. I don't know if anyone's aware, but there's pictures of Will when they were writing the original stuff. So Will, you'd be a very good source of really looking through this, and I'm going to ask one more time that we get a copy. It sounds like there's still a few things that need to be corrected, and if you can make sure you get a copy of this to us. I prefer paper, so I apologize. Jerry, you know that. But if we could get a paper copy prior to submittal to the town, and if you could give us a little bit of time for review. Will, I'm going to ask your input on that too, since you're very familiar with all of these. You there, Will?
Yep, I am.
So I think your input would be very valuable. Not saying that the other people's input isn't valuable, but knowing Will's background with what he's done, I think it would be valuable.
Yep, understood.
Thank you.
Okay, so earlier there was a question about the term "in." Would you like for me to talk about that now, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get my ordinance. So back in, I believe it was 2020, we did some updates to our various lodging uses permitted in town, including adding short-term vacation rental. And at that time, we looked at our other lodging types of uses and identified whether or not they were appropriate. So we did make adjustments to them as well, including the definition of inn and a hotel. So an inn is 6 to 12 bedrooms. A hotel is 13. We do have an inn in Old Town, but that's 13 rooms. So technically, for zoning purposes, the inn is a hotel. And that's perfectly fine. One of our concerns was something that happened in the city across the river, where they've had a situation where some developer came and purchased several properties in a row, and suddenly the inn on one property became an inn on the second property. It actually became a hotel because it was all under the same management. So that's why we have a proprietor required to live within the inn to avoid a situation like that. And that, so there is potential that could happen.
Not interesting. What's the workaround on that? I'm just thinking there's always wording, lawyer and, lawyer up kind of thing, and how can you have that lawyer up to prevent the situation you had across the river?
I think.
I can't think of it right now, but I'm sure there's some pretty interesting ways to lawyer up on that so it prevents that. But allowing, and I can understand what why the need for an inn would be required, but developer's always looking for that twist, and that's what he did. Yeah. So I guess we're gonna need to think about that, or who do we need to ask those questions to? Our attorney? Richardson? Just a possibility so that, again, it's just something that's developed so that you prevent, not even thinking about something like that ever happening, but developers are developers.
Correct, yeah.
Well, that was the reason for putting that the person had to live on property, correct?
Correct.
So if that's taken away, then what's happened over across the river can happen here. Is basically what.
If the guy
you're saying.
decides to buy property next door and separate it and heat it, and then I'm saying, I'm putting this in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if the stipulation states that the individual has to live on the property, it takes that away.
And that's what was requested, is for us
Right.
to take it away so that,
But taking it away, we would have to speak to legal, because taking it away now opens it up to what we don't want.
right. But that's where I'm saying there might be, I don't know if there's a way to lawyer up on it so that it could prevent that concept, and I don't know. Two adjoining properties cannot be considered an inn. Could that clause be put in there or something like that?
I don't think we can do that.
Why not? Not against RESPA or anything like that.
Okay.
I don't know, I'm just throwing it out.
Talking real estate terms.
Yeah. So Amanda would like to speak again, so let me move my things.
I get what you're saying. To help them, but still prevent it from happening.
Yeah.
Denmark, Pierce Scott Architects. I want to clarify a little bit maybe what Pierce was trying to say. I guess where an example would be not multiple properties, but like if you had a house that could do more than, what's the inn, how many numbers is that? No, I'm sorry, bed and breakfast, 4?
Bed and breakfast, 2 to 5 bedrooms.
2 to 5. Say you had a 6-bedroom house. And you wanted to rent that out to different, people, an inn. But what's the difference between that and an inn if it's just a number, I guess? Like, are there any other provisions, like a bed and breakfast, you have to serve the people, bed and, breakfast and whatever, and an inn is managed by some company that takes care of the property, but you're not getting breakfast. Like, there's got to be some other definition between bed and breakfast than just the number of people. And I think that's where it's confusing for people to understand why then, like, a bed and breakfast is normally a proprietor where an inn wouldn't be. So I think there needs to be some clarification in a more direct definition.
I wouldn't bother having a distinction if someone's got to live there anyway.
So then why don't we just have one term? Why would it even be a distinction between a bed and breakfast and an inn? What's the point? Why wouldn't you just say, it can only be a bed and breakfast, it can only be a hotel? There's no in between, because that in between is nothing. So.
Yep, that's what you said.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
that makes
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So Charlotte, are you complete?
I am.
Well, thank you. Is everyone good? So that looks like we're on to item number 1 that was on our agenda. The applicant is here.
Yes, I
Thank
have
you.
the Bruins here. I was looking at my emails and I sent it out, but I don't see where it was actually delivered. So this is likely no fault of the applicants. I would like to throw that out there right now. But I did get a hold of the Bruins and they have come to sit here on behalf of the project. So if you have questions, they are here to answer them. I hope that my report has covered all of those things so that you won't, in theory, have many questions. But to get the process rolling, this is a certificate of appropriateness for a structure at 2 Tabby Shell Road. It is a 576 square foot carriage house. It is a 1-story carriage house to be located by the structure that is being currently constructed at 2 Tabby Shell Road. It's here in the Old Town Bluffton Historic District and its own neighborhood general. The location of this is right here. So this is Pritchard Street. We're sitting right at the bottom of your screen here, south of the pool. And this is the structure. Because this is Bluffton Explorer, you don't see that there is, in fact, a building that is being constructed there right now. Will, you're still with us, right?
Will, you there?
Yes, I am.
That's what I like to hear. Okay, so this project came before you a few years ago. I've got the actual date in the staff report, but when it was brought before you the first time, there was a carriage house that was placed back here. It was a 2-story carriage house, and since the time that that was approved, they've decided that they want to go with a 1-story carriage house instead of that 2-story carriage house, so that's why this is coming before you tonight. Here is your site plan. This is that Fiddler Lane, which runs behind the post office and all of the buildings that are on Tabby there. This is the primary structure. This is the landscape plan that was provided. When they removed the carriage house from the plans, they had to show that they could still meet the canopy coverage, and so they have done that, but they've still got the carriage house on there. So they are exceeding the canopy coverage, which is excellent. These are the floor plans. It's a garage.
So basically, you're not adding, you're subtracting.
Right.
Correct.
And everything the same.
Well, everything's the same except it's missing a top story.
Yeah.
So the elevation.
Yeah.
The elevations are right here. So this garage front elevation is actually the rear elevation of the property. It faces that Fiddler Lane, which is the access for the Tabby Shell Road lots. And then you have the rear elevation, which faces towards the house. This is located between the house and the carriage house, so you will not see the service area here from the street. It is blocked off, but that is a small, trash enclosure type situation for their use. These are the approved primary elevations. I put these in here just so that you can see that they are bringing in the same detailing for the siding material, the size of the windows, the doors, things like that. They all are to match the approved primary structure here. And then these are the wall sections as well as that bracket detail right here. You've heard this before, but the HPC considers 8 review criteria when they consider a certificate of appropriateness application. And when they consider those 8 review criteria, they are authorized to approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. Again, the Bruins are here on behalf of the application. Town staff finds that it meets all of the requirements of our Unified Development Ordinance and has no conditions, recommends it is approved as submitted.
Oh, is this the right project?
2 in a row, y'all.
It looks pretty clean, so I'm looking for a motion.
You have to ask if they want to come up and speak on behalf of the project first, but they don't have to speak on behalf of the project.
Well, I just do want to say that Elaine Gallagher, lived in that house previously next door to you. Was it?
Next door.
Next door. And she was really ecstatic when you cut the trees down because their solar efficiency went way, way up. And then since then she sold it. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that to you as a little goofy side note.
That'll change in 25 years.
Right, yeah. Just a goofy side note. All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you want to ask if they want to speak on behalf of it, just so that we have opened it up.
Do you want to speak on behalf of this? You're here, you've made it all the way here.
We have, and we appreciate the process and look forward to it moving forward.
Thank you. So therefore, I guess I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application as submitted by the applicant.
Looking for a second, I got a second. Any further discussion? No further discussion, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed?
Thanks, Bob.
What did you say, no?
So he said aye.
Oh. We,
Gonna lose connection if you said.
yeah,
Keep going. I don't know what happened. Just kidding.
it looks like we have approval.
We do.
Thank you.
And if you guys are
How many
coming,
are for you in like 2 seconds?
the only other item that we have that's not actually on the agenda for discussion, but is an item for discussion, is that we were asked to speak about the red dot momentarily. The red dot has had it has had a site feature issued for it for the repairs on that structure. They are not making changes to the structure. They're repairing the things that need to be repaired on it, and it has been reviewed. Site features are reviewed at a staff level, and when there are no changes that are going to affect the structure, those can come before staff for those reviews. So if anybody asks you what is going on at the red dot, you can say, well, they are making repairs so that that thing is stable, and if they're making any changes to it in the future, they will have to come back and be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. But right now, they're fixing things that already exist. Some of that material is new, but it is like for like or equivalent. It has been reviewed by town staff, and they're welcome to contact us if they have any questions on that process. But we just wanted to make sure that that was something that you guys had information, because it is not being done by any cover of anything. It is a very approved project, and it's similar to when the post office next door building, the rate is what we call that building, when the rate had the roof come down, they did an emergency permit to stabilize it, and it didn't have to come before you. When it had to come before you was when they started making changes to the structure itself. So, in summary, cool
Yeah,
things are happening on New River Road.
I appreciate that clarification, because sometimes, it could be looked at not being presented to us, but there's nothing funny going on, because they're just completely
Fine.
renovating, renovating exactly in the same exact manner.
It's good for them also that they don't have to go through this process to do something to
It's nothing's changing. It's
prevent
just
further.
Which is good.
Yeah.
You'll see soon the same thing happening at Allen Lockwood. We just issued the site permit feature for that one.
What is that?
Allen
Yeah,
Lockwood
House.
is the white cottage across the street from Church of the Cross on Calhoun. It's been empty forever, missing the front steps.
Gotcha.
Oh,
They're starting to do work, but they've come through with 2 site features. One's gonna be for the chimneys, and one's gonna be for the siding and your roof replacement.
wow.
But those are site features, so it's like for like, it's not gonna change the look, it's just,
Well, it's good to know, thank you,
It's work
because that's a
coming in
real
like-
prominent property,
right,
and
so,
interesting, the guy that owns that whole block now.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I
Glad
think.
you didn't turn all of those into inns.
Very good. I think with that all being said, do we have any other further discussion, any things that need to be talked about? Nope. I am looking for a motion for what they call adjournment.
I motion we adjourn.
I'm looking, second, all in favor? Any discussion? Aye?
Thank you, everyone.
HBC